Hi guys, and welcome to another lesson in advanced woodscraft. Today we're going to deal with summer heat and how to be as comfortable as possible during the summer heat, especially when you're going to have to be sitting up in sunshine. You're going to have a camp and you want to be able to come and take a rest during the day. This is going to deal with a little bit of solar radiation and understanding how heat transfer can affect it. Okay? First step, what we're trying to do is we're trying to set up a camp, and I'm going to be here for, let's say, a couple of days. And I want to be able to, during the day, rest in my hammock to get me up in the air, cool me off, but at the same time, get me out of that sun. So first, as we did the 5 W's, and you remember that. Now we're going to discuss part of that weather W, sun. I'm trying to avoid sun, okay? Shade and shadow look a lot alike, but they're not alike. So, shade, pine trees with these little bitty leaves do not block UV. They make a shadow, but they do little to nothing to block UV radiation coming from the sun. So I'm in the shadow of a pine tree, and normally I think, oh, that's a shade. It is not truly a shade. It is not shielding me. Remember, shade and shadow, all of them start with SH, but there is a difference. So the solar radiation inside of that pine tree shadow is going to be much higher than it is inside of a broader leaf like an oak. Now, you're going to hear this term quite a bit when you're reading old text about a cool shade. Okay, water oak, known for a cool shade because the oaks, especially water oaks and other such plants, exude moisture out through their leaves. It's how the tree cools itself in high UV radiation and heat, and this allows a cool mist to sink, so when you're underneath it, it actually is landing on our skin and evaporating, so it feels cooler. Cool shade. No such thing under pine trees. Pine trees do not emit hardly any water through their leaves. So therefore, when I'm finding my location, I want to find something that I have broad leaves producing the bulk of the shade. Okay? So I've set my hammock up now in an area that is predominantly over me broad leaf trees that are going to give me shade against the heat. The next step is this particular hammock that I'm running has a RIDGELINE as part of it. Now you do not have to use strictly a one wind, but you may, if your hammock does not have, or your ground shelter, if you're going to make a ground shelter, that's fine, but you're going to have to run a RIDGELINE for your first tarp, okay? What we're going to understand is this. The sun's heat impacts our first shade up there. What gets past it, this dapple sunlight you're seeing on my skin, is carrying the full UV radiation, transmission of heat from the sun, okay? It's going to impact our tarp. And when it does, it's going to heat that tarp up. How many of you have come out into that car sitting out in the sun and open up the door and get into it, and the temperature is well above ambient temperature, right? There's my hat, nice and broad. It's absorbing heat. So those car seats, that steering wheel is a much higher temp than the ambient air temperature, correct? It can be 98 out here and it's 150 degrees in that car. That's the same thing, heat transfer. So this tarp that we're going to now put over the top of this, it's going to be heated by this sunlight. And from the bottom side, even though it's blocking the sun, that radiant heat is going to radiate out like an oven does. If I heat up a rock in a fire and I take it out of the fire, it's going to radiate heat, correct? Well, this tarp will now radiate heat to the air underneath it. So let's put up that tarp. Okay, for the sake of demonstration, we're going to do a half. Usually we'd come to both sides, but I'm setting it up along the ridge line of the hammock going away from me. Now this is simply a single tarp that would normally be draped like that onto either side and form a tunnel. But what I've done here is I've draped both sides to that size, making a double thick tarp. If I only had one tarp, and I'm facing a hot day with a hot sun coming from that way, by making a double wall, I have created a double wall shelter. I've made a double wall tarp, okay? Now the sun is coming down and heating the outer layer of this tarp. By separating the two angles, so I have one going to the ground and one going slightly further out, I make a space where the sun heats the outer tarp. That heat transfers to the void between the two layers, and air flows through, keeping this layer close to me cool. And so therefore when I lay out here and I take out my chill, and I'm taking my daily siesta after lunch, I'm in a cooler position, because the sun is not hitting this tarp immediately above me, this surface, and then it radiating through to me. It's hitting the outer surface. But let us say that this is just simply a single tarp, and it's draped over in front as well as back. When I lay here, the sun's going to warm this up and it's going to radiate through to me. So I'm basically still kind of in an oven, aren't I? That heat's going to radiate through. What can I do to increase my heat protection, my UV protection? I run a ridge line above it, and I run a second tarp. That second tarp will take the heat. The tarp that's lower and right above me will be cooler, and therefore the air between the two tarps will be heated up and want to flow out by natural convection, thus cooling the underside tarp as it sucks cool air in to go out. Okay? Now ideally, in a real situation, I would have this side of the tarp high and that side of the tarp low, facing the sun, so that between those two layers, and get up close so you can be more specific. Here is my bottom tarp. This side you're seeing right here. Above it, I put the second tarp. This end, away from the sun, is higher than the side facing the sun, which is lower. So the sun's radiation is coming down this way. With these double tarps, this outer tarp is going to get hot, and it's going to radiate the heat through. But since it's at such an angle, the air is going to want to flow this way because heat rises, doesn't it? And so between those two layers, the heat's going to flow to the top, sucking cool air in between, keeping this bottom tarp cooler because it's constant fresh air flow. It doesn't get to radiate through by convection and do this. Air conducting between them is keeping that inner surface cool. What can I do to improve it even more? I make my upper tarp a reusable space blanket. Now let me set that up and then we'll walk around back and take a look. Okay, now here is my hammock. Here is my first tarp layer. Here's a gap of somewhere around a foot, and here's my second tarp layer. The solar radiation is going to heat up this tarp, but since it's got that reflective side, I have that on the other side, which is automatically helping me by reflecting a lot of that heat. It can't help but absorb heat, but it can reflect a lot of heat at the same time. So that heat's coming down and hitting this, and it's going to warm up this one, but the gap between this tarp and this tarp is nearly a foot. And that air current is going to flow up the face of this naturally as this heats, because the upper edge is higher and heat follows the curve and will rise. So this heat will flow out up here. That guarantees that this is a true shade. It is both blocking the sun's heat, blocking the sun's radiation, and allowing an air current to form. There will be some minor warming of this. Not nearly like this, but some minor. And that's going to draft cool air up and out of this. As it does, it's bringing the ground cool air out of the shadow up to me. So this is a cool shade. By me being in this, even in the heat of the day, I am fully sheltered from the sun. All the heat radiation, all the solar radiation is blocked off of me. Now, if this tarp came to the front, maybe I need it for a little like rain protection sometime during the day. But as I've got it right here, it's a double layer on this line. So I get double insulation. And then I got this spaced out above it. I am in a cool shade no matter what. So this is going to be the coolest place to be around here. I will not be any cooler than the ambient air temperature, but let's say the ambient air temperature is 95 degrees. I'm not adding any solar heating to me this way, so I will be, through evaporation, cooler. Pretty much a good guarantee I'm going to be wet with sweat, right? In 95 degrees, because the closer you get to body temperature, the harder it is for your body to regulate its temperature and expel water. And once we go beyond our human body temperature and say we're 100 degrees, now we're fighting not to absorb heat. See, because we cannot radiate out, because maybe the like it is here in the south, the humidity is 90%. Well, it won't absorb the water. It doesn't evaporate off my skin to help cool me nearly as fast. But by getting under this updraft right here will help cool me by airflow, a little bit of airflow to help dry my skin, so therefore I can exude more sweat, therefore I can cool myself. If I'm already wearing sopping wet clothes, and on odds at those type temps I am, it helps those clothing dry, it helps those clothing take heat away from me. Evaporation, see. I'm out of the solar, I'm out of everything. And let me step around to the side with the camera so I can show you the individual layers. Okay, here is my first layer of protection. Notice this large gap, at least a full hand width apart. You see this a lot out in the deserts. I know guys did this in Iraq and stuff, and it goes all the way back to World War II, World War I. Those guys that were over there fighting in that part of the world talk about, my God, at the heat, and how they would put up an extra layer like this. Now see, this shiny reflected side is reflecting heat. It's warm still by convection, but air flowing through here is going to keep it from collapsing. And then this right here is my final shade that protects me. In conclusion, for the advanced Woodscraft, this is the double tarp setup used in extreme summer conditions. What if I'm having to come out here and work? Using a double tarp like this will make my work site cooler. Camping, my daytime, let me go lay down and cool off during the day, etc. This works the best, at least in my experience. Hope you've enjoyed this. Please leave any questions or comments below, and there will be more videos coming up in the future. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.